15 years, nearly 300 wins, 7 NCAA tournament appearances, and yet it's over. Fran McCaffery, the winningest coach in Iowa men's basketball history, is out. A coach known for his fiery passion and relentless energy on the sidelines now finds himself on the outside looking in. The question is, how did we get here? For years, McCaffery was the face of Hawkeyes basketball, pacing up and down the court, waving his arms, shouting instructions, and at times letting his emotions get the best of him. His presence alone could electrify an arena. Under his leadership, Iowa consistently ranked among the top-scoring teams in the Big Ten. He developed stars like Luka Garza, Keegan Murray, and Chris Murray, players who went on to make names for themselves on the national stage. There was always a sense that, at any moment, Iowa could break through to something bigger. But that moment never came. Despite McCaffery's success, the program seemed stuck in a cycle, good enough to compete, but never quite able to take the next step. No Sweet 16 appearances, no deep tournament runs. Year after year, promising seasons ended in disappointment, and for the Hawkeye faithful, patience began to wear thin. Then came this season the tipping point. A 17-16 record, a 7-13 finish in Big Ten play, no NCAA tournament bid for the second straight year, and in what would be his final game as Iowa's head coach, McCaffery was ejected in the Big Ten tournament after an outburst on the sidelines. It was a moment that, in many ways, symbolized the frustration that had been building for years. But this decision wasn't just about wins and losses. Attendance at Carver Hawkeye Arena had plummeted, a program that once stood on equal footing with Iowa football in terms of passion and excitement now found itself overshadowed not just by football, but by the women's basketball team, which has been setting attendance records of its own. The numbers told the story: thousands of empty seats, dwindling enthusiasm, and a program that, despite its offensive firepower, was losing its grip on relevance. And so, the decision was made. The McCaffery era is over. Now, the search begins for a new leader, someone who can bring Iowa basketball back to national prominence, someone who can not only win games but win back the fan base. Who will it be, and what does the future hold for McCaffery himself? Let's break it all down. 15 years ago, Fran McCaffery arrived in Iowa City with a mission to bring Hawkeye basketball back to national relevance. The program was struggling, stuck in mediocrity, and fans had grown restless. Iowa needed a leader, someone who could not only win, but inject life into a team that had lost its identity. McCaffery, with his intense passion and no-nonsense approach, was that guy, and for a while, he delivered. Year by year, Iowa climbed back into the conversation. The Hawkeyes became a high-powered offensive force, one of the most exciting teams in the Big Ten. McCaffery built a culture of fearless, fast-paced basketball, turning Carver Hawkeye Arena into a place where opposing teams knew they were in for a fight. He wasn't just coaching a team, he was building a foundation. Under his leadership, Iowa saw its most consistent success in decades. The Hawkeyes went from an afterthought to a team that could punch with the best. 7 NCAA tournament appearances, multiple ranked seasons, standout players like Luka Garza, Keegan Murray, and Chris Murray, players who not only dominated in college, but went on to make waves at the next level. McCaffery had turned Iowa into a contender again, proving that the program had a place among college basketball's elite. But something was missing. For all the success, there was a ceiling Iowa could never quite break through. Despite all those tournament appearances, Iowa never reached the Sweet 16 under McCaffery. When it mattered most, they came up short. The 2021 tournament loss to Oregon, the shocking first-round exit to Richmond in 2022. Time after time, promising seasons ended in heartbreak. And then the slide began. The past 3 seasons saw Iowa take a step back. The wins became harder to come by. The energy in the fanbase started to fade. Attendance dropped to its lowest levels in decades. A troubling sign for a program once considered the heartbeat of Iowa athletics. As much as McCaffery had built, the cracks were beginning to show. So, what went wrong? Why did the Hawkeyes decide it was time for a change? And more importantly, what happens now? The answers may not be simple, but they're important. Let's dig deeper. It wasn't just another loss. It was a moment that seemed to capture everything that had been building for years: frustration, disappointment, and the unmistakable sense that change was inevitable. Fran McCaffery's final game as Iowa's head coach didn't just end in defeat, it ended in controversy. The 2025 Big Ten tournament matchup against Illinois was always going to be a high-stakes battle, but no one expected it to be McCaffery's last stand. The game itself was slipping away, and tensions were running high. Iowa had fought hard all season, but couldn't shake the inconsistency that had plagued them for months. Every possession felt like a fight, every call from the officials like another gut punch. And then, it happened. McCaffery, never one to hide his emotions, erupted. He charged toward the referees, his voice echoing through the arena. Fans had seen this before. His fiery personality was part of what made him who he was. But this time, it felt different. The whistle blew, a technical foul, then another. Within seconds, McCaffery was ejected, storming off the court as the Illinois crowd roared. It was an unceremonious exit for a coach who had poured 15 years into this program. And as Iowa fell to Illinois, any remaining hope of an NCAA tournament, it vanished. For the second straight year, the Hawkeyes would be left out of March Madness. At this time, there was no saving grace, no sign that things were about to turn around. The fans knew it. The administration knew it. The energy that once surrounded Iowa basketball had faded. Attendance had hit historic lows, with thousands of empty seats serving as a painful reminder that something wasn't working. While Iowa's football and wrestling programs thrived, the men's basketball team was being left behind. McCaffery's firing wasn't just about one game, it was about the slow unraveling of a program that once stood as a powerhouse. The numbers told the story: declining records, declining fan support, and a growing disconnect between the team and its supporters. It was no longer just about basketball. It was about the future of Iowa athletics, and the university made its choice. The McCaffery era was officially over, but now, the real question begins: what happens next? Let's discuss the rise and fall of McCaffery's tenure 15 years ago. Iowa men's basketball was in a dark place. The program was struggling, the fan base was frustrated, and success felt like a distant memory. Then came Fran McCaffery, a fiery, relentless coach with a reputation for turning programs around. When he arrived in Iowa City in 2010, he brought something the team desperately needed: hope. The glory years. Building a competitive program, McCaffery wasted no time making an impact. He instilled a fast-paced, high-scoring style of basketball that quickly turned the Hawkeyes into a force in the Big Ten. In his first few years, Iowa went from an afterthought to a legitimate contender, bringing excitement back to Carver Hawkeye Arena. By 2014, McCaffery had led the Hawkeyes to their first NCAA tournament appearance in nearly a decade. It was just the beginning. Over the next several seasons, Iowa became a mainstay in the national rankings: 7 NCAA tournament appearances, 10 seasons with a .500 or better record in the Big Ten. At their best, the Hawkeyes played some of the most entertaining basketball in the country, leading the conference and scoring multiple times. But McCaffery wasn't just winning, he was developing stars. Under his leadership, Iowa produced some of the greatest players in program history. Luka Garza became a 2-time National Player of the Year, shattering records and redefining what it meant to be a dominant big man. Keegan Murray followed, emerging as a top NBA prospect. Chris Murray, Jara Uthoff, Devin Marble. McCaffery had an eye for talent, and he knew how to develop it. The Hawkeyes weren't just competing, they were producing some of the best players in college basketball. For a while, it felt like Iowa was on the cusp of something big. They were regularly ranked, contending for Big Ten titles, and making deep runs in the conference tournament. But for all the success, there was one thing missing: a deep NCAA tournament run. The Hawkeyes kept hitting the ceiling, and eventually, that ceiling became impossible to ignore. The downward spiral. While Iowa made the changes, the years went on. Cracks began to show. The once explosive offense could still put up points, but Iowa's defense became a major liability. Season after season, the Hawkeyes found themselves near the bottom of the Big Ten in defensive rankings. They could score with anyone, but they couldn't get stops when it mattered. And then came the postseason struggles. In 2021, Iowa entered the NCAA tournament as a No.2 seed, led by Luka Garza in his final season. Expectations were high. This was supposed to be the year they broke through. Instead, they gave up 95 points to Oregon in the second round, getting run off the court in a crushing 15-point loss. The following year, after winning the Big Ten tournament, they were upset by No.12 seed Richmond in the first round. Just like that, the momentum was gone. The losses started piling up, and so did the questions. Over the past 3 seasons, Iowa's win totals declined. They finished below .50 in the Big Ten twice, then caught tournament bids stop coming. A program that once felt like it was rising had suddenly stalled. But the real warning sign wasn't just the losses, it was the empty seats. Attendance at Carver Hawkeye Arena plummeted, hitting its lowest mark since the 1960s. The energy that once surrounded the program had faded. Fans weren't just disappointed, they were disengaged. When Iowa's women's basketball team started drawing bigger crowds and generating more revenue, it became clear something had to change. The breaking point, what led to McCaffery's firing tipping point, came in the 2025 season. Iowa failed to make the NCAA tournament for the second straight year. The team finished with a 17-16 record, barely scraping by in conference play. The high-powered offense was still there, but the defense remained a disaster. And the worst part? The fans had stopped believing. Then there was the financial side of things. Iowa men's basketball was no longer pulling its weight. The women's program, fueled by national star power, had become the biggest basketball attraction in town. Revenue dipped, attendance numbers were dismal, and donors started asking questions. If Iowa football could sell out every game, if wrestling could pack arenas, if the women's team could generate national buzz, why was the men's basketball program falling behind? The final straw came in the Big Ten tournament. McCaffery's fiery personality, once seen as a strength, became a liability. His emotional outburst and ejection in a loss to Illinois wasn't just a bad look, it was the moment. The administration knew they had to move on, and just like that, the Fran McCaffery era was over. But with change comes uncertainty. The Hawkeyes now face their biggest challenge in years, finding the right leader to take them forward. Who will step in to fill McCaffery's shoes? And what does this shakeup mean for the future of Iowa basketball? The search for answers begins now. The news hit Iowa fans like a shockwave. Some saw it coming for years, while others couldn't believe it actually happened. Fran McCaffery, the longest tenured coach in modern Iowa basketball history, was out, and just like that, an era that spanned 15 seasons was over. But was this the right call? The reactions have been anything but unanimous. For some, this was a long overdue decision. They point to the lack of deep tournament runs, the declining attendance, and the defensive struggles that never seemed to improve. The numbers don't lie. Back-to-back seasons without an NCAA tournament bid made it impossible for the administration to ignore the downward trend. The fans who supported the move argue that Iowa had hit a ceiling under McCaffery, and no matter how many regular season wins or conference tournament upsets he pulled off, the program was never going to take that next step under his leadership. But not everyone sees it that way. For a generation of Hawkeye fans, McCaffery wasn't just a coach, he was the man who brought Iowa basketball back from the dead. Before he arrived, the program was a shell of what it once was. He restored its identity, gave it a fast-paced, exciting style, and turned Iowa into a name people respected again. There are those who believe he deserved more time, that his passion for the game and his ability to develop elite players like Luka Garza and Keegan Murray should have earned him a few more chances. Then, there's the impact on the players. Some recruits had committed to Iowa because of McCaffery. His departure leaves uncertainty not just for the current roster, but for future talent considering the program. What happens now? Does Iowa's next head coach have to rebuild the team from scratch? Will key players transfer? It's a moment of transition, and in college basketball, that can either mean the beginning of something great or a step into instability. And what about McCaffery himself? No one can deny what he accomplished. He turned Iowa into a regular Big Ten contender, helped shape multiple NBA-caliber players, and brought energy back to Carver Hawkeye Arena. But in the end, it wasn't enough. His legacy will be debated for years. Was he the coach who revived Iowa basketball, or the coach who could never quite get them to the next level? One thing is certain, Iowa basketball is entering a new chapter. A decision this big comes with consequences, and now all eyes are on what happens next. Who will step in to take over? And can they do what McCaffery couldn't, turn Iowa into a true national power? The search for the next leader begins now. The future of Iowa basketball Fran McCaffery era is over. But Iowa basketball doesn't have time to dwell on the past. A new chapter is about to begin, and the next decision the program makes could shape its future for the next decade. The question now isn't just who will replace McCaffery, but what kind of coach Iowa needs to take that elusive next step. Who could replace McCaffery? The search for Iowa's next head coach is already underway, and several names are being floated. As potential candidates, each brings a different vision, a different style, and a different level of experience. Among the frontrunners are coaches with deep ties to the Midwest names. That could excite the fan base and bring renewed energy to the program.da or Ian DeVries, the current head coach at West Virginia, has strong Iowa roots. A native of Appleton, Iowa, he spent years turning Drake into a mid-major powerhouse before moving on to bigger opportunities. His ability to develop talent and implement a balanced system makes him an appealing option. Then there's Chris Jans, the fiery and defensive-minded head coach at Mississippi State, who has proven he can win in tough conferences. If Iowa wants a shift from McCaffery's offensive-heavy philosophy, Jans could be the guy. Steve Forbes, currently at Wake Forest, has built winning programs at multiple levels, bringing both experience and a strong recruiting ability. Ben McCollum, a name less familiar to casual fans, has dominated at the Division II level with Northwest Missouri State. He's innovative, highly respected, and could be the kind of fresh hire that shakes things up in a big way. Then there's Eric Henderson, the South Dakota State head coach who has led the Jackrabbits to multiple tournament appearances and is known for building tough, disciplined teams. But beyond individual names, the question is, what does Iowa need most? A recruiter who can bring in top-tier talent, a defensive mastermind who can fix the program's biggest weakness, a coach who knows how to win in March. It's a decision that can't be rushed, but one that can't afford to be wrong. Whoever steps in will inherit a team in transition, a program searching for an identity, and a fan base desperate for something new. What's next for McCaffery? And then there's the man at the center of it all, Fran McCaffery. His time in Iowa City has come to an end. But is this the end of his coaching career? At 65, he still has the fire and passion that defined his tenure. Will another program take a chance on him, or does he decide that, after a long and intense career, it's time to step away from the game? For all the criticism he's faced, McCaffery's legacy is secure. He took over a struggling Iowa program and made it competitive again. He gave the fans unforgettable moments, developed elite talent, and put Hawkeye basketball back on the map. But in the end, his story will always be one of unfinished business, a coach who did everything but take Iowa to the next level. Whether McCaffery finds a new home or rides off into retirement, his impact on Iowa basketball won't be forgotten. But now, the program moves forward. A new coach, a new philosophy, a new chance to finally become the program fans have been waiting for. The question now is simple: who's ready to take Iowa where McCaffery couldn't? Iowa basketball is at a crossroads. The firing of Fran McCaffery marks the end of an era, but was it the right decision? Some say it was long overdue, a move that had to happen if Iowa ever wanted to break through to the next level. Others argue that McCaffery deserved more time, that his legacy of rebuilding the program should have earned him another shot. Now, we want to hear from you. Was this the right call? Should Iowa have stuck with McCaffery, or was it time to move on? And perhaps the biggest question of all, who should take over as the next head coach? Should Iowa go after an established name or take a risk on a fresh face? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's get the conversation going. The next few months will define the future of Iowa basketball, and the debate is just getting started. So if you love college hoops and want to stay updated on everything happening with the Hawkeyes, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll be covering every twist and turn as Iowa searches for its next leader, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. This is your chance to weigh in. Who should be the next face of Hawkeye basketball? Let's talk about it.